And then there was another guy who said they were at an airport. And again, he's saying he was there. This wasn't a dream. And he's
Mm.
at those big windows. So you can look out and see the aeroplanes and you can see the runway. And the airport was completely empty, except there was somebody next to him. But when he looked round, they weren't there. He could see them out the corner of his eye. And this
Mm.
aircraft came along the runway, started taking off, and then caught fire and exploded. And he saw that and he was really shocked with it. And the next thing he knew, he was in that aeroplane 2 minutes before. So he knew it was going to take off and explode.
Mm.
And it was almost this thing where it's like the ETs are testing humans to see how they react emotionally to certain scenarios.
Mm. So I can imagine that some people have come to you and they did not believe in reincarnation or past lives, and yet they spoke about, a past life. Has that happened or
It hasn't happened, really.
what?
I think that when people come to do a past life regression, they're already sort of past a certain point in belief.
Oh, that would be so cool. Now you got to
Yeah,
have one. You have to have that person who came with someone else and they had no belief in this. Oh, okay, okay, okay.
I did.
Um,
So I just say I had a guy who was a guest on my podcast, and he'd written a book about his experience, and he was a homicide detective, and I think it was Philadelphia,
mm,
38 years, and he was a real tough guy. And
mm,
a lady in his precinct kept saying to him, "You should do a past life regression." And he was like, "I don't want to do it. I don't care about it. I'm not interested. I don't believe in it." And he said it got to a point where he'd be walking along the hallway and he'd see her coming and he'd quickly dive into an office to get out of her way. So he didn't have to see her. And he thought, this is getting silly. So I'll do the past life regression. I'll prove it's all nonsense and then we can get on with our lives.
mm,
And he ended up seeing this past life and he wanted to prove that it was nonsense. But this was before the internet. So he saw himself painting a portrait of somebody and it was what he called the hunchback woman.
mm,
And so he thought, I must have seen this on TV, this portrait, or in a gallery or something. And so he was a detective and he knew how to like investigate things. And he
mm,
could not find this portrait anywhere. And he went to New York and he went to Los Angeles and asking all these people, these gallery people, say, do you know a portrait like this? And they were saying, no, doesn't ring a bell. And he kind of gave up on it. And he went to New Orleans on holiday with his wife, went into this little gallery that was just selling paintings. And he went upstairs where the rubbish paintings were. And there was this portrait exactly as it was in the past life.
oh,
And
wow.
the person that owned the gallery gave him a little leaflet that was all about the artist. And it was a guy who worked in New York who wasn't famous. He was okay as an artist, and he might
Mm,
charge a couple of $100s to do a portrait for somebody. And this was
mm,
about, I don't know, 1875, 1890, those sorts of years. And what he really wanted to do was landscapes. And he saw all this stuff, and he got what he called 28 proofs, things that he saw in the past life. 28 of them were proven to be real for this artist that was not famous, and there's no way he could have known these things about this person.
wow. On so many levels, that's just amazing because of all, like, how did he end up at that gallery and on that floor and right in front of that picture? Like, you got to be kidding me. So it just shows that there's a lot of like invisible forces at play in this life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard
Wow.
they say spirits are master orchestrators for
Mm.
bringing these things together. I got so many stories. I've just been reminded of other stories.
That's what I was saying. I love to get into them, so I'm trying to have less questions, and I think I do. I think we're ready to just jump in. I think what question that came up when what you just said is like, and if you have an answer, if you don't, it's fine. What is the most number of past lives that you've ever heard someone had?
Sort of the answer is countless or too
Mm,
many to number. because it's one of the things we ask the spirit guide. It's just how
Mm,
many past lives, and occasionally they'll say 12 or 27. Sometimes it's 765. Other
mm.
times they say just don't even try and work out the number. It's this huge number.
Oh my goodness. And that number, I mean, you said one is 27, and then you have some that are in the thousands. I've heard in the thousands. What I don't even know how to finish the question. I just like because I mean we don't have an answer for it, but I just wonder like what is the difference? What would make one person have 27 or one as opposed to 50,000? Like where is the
Yeah.
reasoning? That is just wow. Okay. All right, so then I think my next question is going to allow you to jump into some great stories, right?
Okay.
So, in your sessions, have you come across religious figures, ETs? You said that already. The creator, if there's a prime creator, if there's lower gods and goddesses, non-human, like just give me some stories of like just the weirdest scenarios that you've come across.
Well, it's like that time we went to the Council of Elders and there was an ET on the council and she was saying some of them just look like uh people made of light, there's no physicality to them. And it's this weird thing as well where the pets show up and they can communicate with the pets, but it's not like it's the pets have the same intelligence of humans. It's almost like there's a lot of love coming from them and they're really happy to see you, but it's not like you can have a conversation. And man, there's I had a past life regression where I was taken through it, and it got to this point where I saw myself as a young man in London, and I was maybe 17, and it was 1950s, and I had this suit, and I had my hair done a certain way, and I was thinking, man, I look fantastic. Check me out. And I went into this pub, and then suddenly I went up through the roof, and I went up above the earth like a rocket so fast, and I was floating in space, looking down on Earth. And there was this big hole in space next to me, which I found quite scary. And I looked into it, and it just seemed to go into infinity. And then an instant later, I was back in the room with the hypnotherapist, and I felt a face right next to me, and it was like their cheek was touching my cheek, and they were looking down. They had a huge smile, and they were kind of like saying, "So pleased you came here today and did this." And there was a wall off to the right of me that was maybe 3 or 4 feet away, but in my sight, I could see 20 feet away on that side, all these people behind a really bright light, and I could see them silhouetted, and it was like there was so much happiness and love. They were so pleased that I'd done that past life regression. And so that was a weird thing that came up with like my spirit guide. But
Mm,
I've met my spirit guide other times where they've seemed to be very kind of humorous and messing about. And I hear that from people. The spirit guides have a great sense of humor. It's
mm.
almost like they're saying, it's not all solemn and sort of serious in the afterlife. I've seen my spirit guide doing the Macarena and walking like an Egyptian and all these kinds of things.
And have you been able to see them like as in like physically? Like some people say, "Oh, I have a Arcturian spirit guide. I have a sumo wrestler, spirit guide." Have you been able to see what they want to appear like physically, like what
No,
they
it's
are?
it's when I'm hypnotized, you get that mental image that's very strong. And
Mm.
I've seen the guide morph from male to female.
Mm.
And when they're female, they're very serious. And so when I see that happen, it's like, uh-oh, something's going to happen now.
So that particular guide in general, like when
Yeah.
they, oh wow, that's interesting. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, and then so have you come across angels? Because I know with some hypnotherapists they come in for healing. So have you come across angels?
Yeah. I've had people say Michael, Gabriel, and there was another one that was
Raphael?
no, I think was it Metatron or something? There was
Oh,
might have been a Z in there, another one as well.
okay.
And they seem to be, it's almost like they see the spirit guide and they're almost on the same level as us. with their, I don't know what you would call it, not their power or their energy, but when the angels come in, it's like a whole other level of energy and strength and the way they behave and the way they treat you. It's
Mm,
more a child-parent relationship.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Okay, and so do they, with the times that they've come in, do you feel like they're coming in for a reason? Because I mean, those are archangels. Those are like the top, you know. Are they coming in for a particular reason, or is it because it's the particular person? Like, why do you think they would come out in a session?
I don't know. It's not a thing I control. It's just, it's like we get
Mm,
into this space and I go, well, who's with you? And they might say, well, there's an angel here. And I say, what's their name? Can you ask them their name? And they say, well, their name's Michael. And
mm,
then we ask them questions about the person's past lives and current life and things, and they seem happy to talk about all that stuff.
you said not happy.
They do seem happy.
Oh, dude. Okay, I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, okay, okay. So it's really kind of random. It's no like, oh, this person's like extra special spirit, and so the archangels are here. It's
Yeah.
just.
And I also feel like there's a sorry, there's a almost a criticism that skeptics could have of saying, well, they're seeing a spirit guide because you told them to. They're hypnotized. It's the power of suggestion. But if I
Mm,
say you're going into this area where you'll encounter a spirit guide, and they go, no, it's not a spirit guide, it's an angel. It's not,
mm.
can't say that I've controlled them to get them to see that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. Okay, and have you, okay, in your sessions and what you've gathered, have you come across like a prime creator, like a creator of all, a feeling of some kind of energy that created everything, or is it really just based on the beliefs of the client? Um, you know.
No, I haven't come across that.
Mm,
People do say when they get into that space that it's that feeling of love, like you would hear from near-death experiences, how they describe that space. But I haven't had anybody else say that that they've encountered that kind of a presence. I've done hundreds of sessions, maybe thousands, and maybe I'm wrong actually, but I can't remember one.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. Because I mean, that is something that not all NDEers, but a good amount. Like that would be one of the things is that they either somehow say that they actually meet it, they see, this creator, or that they just feel it. Like they just know, okay, there is something. I never actually experienced it, but I can feel that. Yeah, it is. So I was just curious about that. Okay. So have you heard? Is there anything that you've heard? And then this is a big question because again, I was following two hypnotherapists who said some very interesting things. Like they were using the QHHT method, and they were saying that they came across something where a certain amount of years back, I think maybe in the 2000s, they kept hearing people saying that they were kind of forced on this planet or forced back into reincarnation. It's a prison planet and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden there was a total switch in that. They didn't hear this anymore. And I thought this was very, very weird and enough to like bring up now. But have you had any sessions where people were saying something about forced reincarnation or Earth being a prison planet?
No, never.
Okay.
I've never come across that. And
Okay.
I was taken through the QHHT by a lady who was trained by Dolores Cannon, and it never came up. I've never come across that.
Cool, cool. Okay, I have to ask for the people who believe that.
Yeah, yeah.
And is QHHT similar to your past life regression process, or is it a little different? Like, what would you say?
I'd say it's similar, but
Hmm.
I think that the therapeutic techniques are different to what I would do. But I'm not an
Hmm.
expert on every little thing of how that works.
Yeah. So going into the therapeutic part, I've heard some amazing healing, like amazing off the charts of healing. Like 1 second they have this issue, they have the past life regression, and then it's gone. It is completely gone. What is your most, if you can say maybe one or two examples of your most spectacular healing sessions?
Yeah, there's been a lot of emotional healing that's come up, and that there's like a typical sort of thing is there was a woman who had a terrible relationship with her mother in this life, and she was in her 50s. And we went to a past life. It was just the same. Her mother is incarnated with her in the past life. It was a terrible relationship. But the reason for the relationship being really bad in the past life was really insightful for her. And she emailed me a couple of weeks after the session and said, it's the first time in 20 years I've been to my mum's house and not been angry as soon as I get through the door. And I had another time, there was a lady, she had eczema on her leg.
Mm.
And in the past life, she was a man, she was a hunter in a forest, and this bear trap came up, and this big metal claws grabbed her leg. And she's told me a few weeks afterwards that the eczema had completely cleared up after seeing that, and that the bear trap grabbed her leg exactly where the eczema is. And she
Wow.
tried everything her whole life to get rid of this eczema, and she just couldn't do it.
Mm.
I've had people with back pain that's been relieved, and a guy with bad stomach pains. And we find that they go to the doctor, and the doctors can find no reason for this pain, but we do something in a past life that relieves it. And it's almost like I don't know what it is. I got techniques to do release of energy and breaking the bond to a past life,
Mm.
but it seems more like the spirit world are doing something. And I interviewed somebody a couple of days ago who had a near-death experience, and they were in the hospital bed when they died with two doctors right there and three nurses. They had their near-death experience and they came back, and there was one nurse in the room, and the lights were off and all the equipment had gone. And it's just like they'd given up on him. They'd say, right, he's dead now. Let's prepare the morgue. Let's get the guys with the trolley to take the body away. And he woke up and looked at the nurse and waved at her and said, like, hello. And she jumped out of her skin. But what they said afterwards is that you should not be alive.
Mm.
You've come back, and he said that God sent him back and told him he'd be okay. And it's that kind of spiritual healing that's beyond medicine. The doctors don't understand how he could be alive for, the problem that he was having with his body. So I think there's
Wow.
something in past life regression is tapping into that kind of spiritual ability to heal. And
Mm.
I've heard all sorts of things in near-death experiences where they talk about energy in the body and how there's almost a matrix or a network or something, and the spirits were working with that to make things better. People in the near-death experience will talk to their spirit guides or others and say, okay, I'll go back, but I don't want to have a terrible time when I go back. And so
Yeah.
they work with them to fix that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like you. I've heard these amazing healing experiences, and it makes you just really question, like, I guess ultimately, if you really think about it, then we really all do hold the potential to heal ourselves. We just don't know how to do it. Like there is a way that we could heal. Um, so are there any sessions that were so bizarre that it still is kind of stuck in your head? You're just kind of trying to figure out what happened there. Like, what was that?
Yeah, there's the one with this guy who went to a past life on another planet. And I did another session with him where we asked the spirit guide how many past lives has he had, and they said one. And I said one, and they go one on this planet, lots of past lives on other planets. And we went to this past life where he was on another planet, and it was like he was an alien secret agent, and
Mm.
he killed one of the other aliens in a fight. And that was really weird because it was like a sci-fi movie. It didn't,
Oh,
but it was just all coming out of him, and he had so much detail. And in the end, I asked him, and he agreed that we could put the audio out as a podcast episode.
good,
So
good.
it's out there. People can listen to it. It's just weird what comes up, what came up there. But the thing you're asking me that, and I've done so many sessions that have been so weird. It's not. It's like they all blend into one.
Now, have you? I mean, and I don't want to push out of here, but the questions here: have you written a book? Because I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you could write a book, like for sure. Like, and it would just be 10 times better than any sci-fi out there. And it's reality.
Yeah, but I'm writing a book about
Good.
near-death experiences. That's what
Okay.
I'm writing about. These times when people see something when they're out of their body, and
Mm,
then later it's verified. So it's like proof that they were out of their body. So that's
mm.
what the book's about.
Okay, okay. But that is just so interesting. I mean, sometimes you come across people and you kind of feel like, okay, this is an alien. Like this is no, there's no way this is a human being. And that guy really could be one of those because he's only had one here. Like he really is just straight off the boat or the ship, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Um, so one of my major questions, and it's like a big, broad question, is after all of these sessions, and kind of paying attention to the commonalities, do you, unlike NDEs, because like for instance, with NDEs, people might go to 20 different places, completely drastically different places, see different people, see, Jesus or Buddha or this or that. With hypnotherapy, are you seeing the same things like the Akashic records and certain halls and healing centers and councils? Does it seem pretty congruent where it's you can have a good idea what's on the other side, or are they drastically, drastically different in the in between? So what I'm talking about, the in between life
Well,
experiences.
yeah, when I take people to that space, it's almost always to encounter the spirit guide. So we don't go anywhere else. It's only if they
Mm,
want to take us into it. But with the Michael Newton books where he talks about these different places, when people are spontaneously taken in my sessions, they go to those places like
mm.
maybe the healing table, the council of elders, and all those sorts of things that we hear about.
That's very interesting. That really kind of just shows that there's some truth to this. Like there's something there, right, that we should be paying attention to. So after taking this role, right, becoming a hypnotherapist, do you feel like your personal beliefs have changed based on all that you've experienced through these sessions, or have they kind of stayed the same?
I think I've probably become more spiritual and more believing of it all.
Hmm.
It's a thing where I am kind of skeptical, but I think it's important. You've got to remain skeptical. You can't go completely off into crazy land with it all. I like a saying that says you've got to keep an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out. And it's like with some things I've got a big gray area when you might have just here there's all right I believe that, and just here there's I don't believe that, and in between there's a huge gray area where you're just not sure. And most of that stuff for me comes up with UFOs and people who have alien abduction and the things they describe there, and things that have come up in my experience as well about you're just not sure whether you can believe it. And also, with physical mediumship, the things I've heard described in that, I'd love to go to a physical mediumship seance to see what happens. And
Mm.
there was, shall I tell you this story? It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
with,
I love stories. Go ahead, go ahead.
it was, I was talking to Leslie Kane, and she's got a book called Surviving Death, and Netflix made a series based on her book. And
Mm,
she was also the New York Times journalist that broke the story with the Navy UFO videos.
mm,
And she's written this book about surviving death. And she had a seance with this physical medium in England called Stuart Alexander. And so she says Stuart Alexander's sitting in a chair, and they've got cable ties around his wrists, holding his wrists to the chair. And there's a
mm,
person either side of him holding his hands. And in front of them is this table with a glass top, so you can see right through the table. And there's a small red light underneath.
mm,
And this kind of white mist was coming from the medium, and it was going down to the floor, and then it crept up over the top of the table. And the mist formed into a human hand. And Leslie Kane's right there at the table watching it. And there was this
mm.
voice up in like in the ceiling said, "Well, aren't you going to shake my hand?" And she reached down and she said it felt just like a human hand, except it was cold. And she could feel the
Wow.
skin and the muscles and the way the fingers moved. And then
Mm,
she let go and it just kind of dissipated and it went back to mist. And
mm.
it sounds so crazy. It's like Harry Potter magic in real life. But
Yeah,
she's a New York Times journalist, and she
yeah.
says this really happened. And so eventually I interviewed Stuart Alexander on my podcast, and this is something that would happen often in his seances. And all these
Mm,
other things turn up in physical mediumship seances, which are really out there. But so
Wow.
that's one of my ambitions is to go to one of those seances, but they're difficult to get into.
Yeah. I think I'd be too scared person. But I mean, yeah, there's so much that we just don't know about. We really don't. And so I'm okay, so oh, who's my next question? I had another question based on that. Uh, okay, so what do you think it would look like if everybody on this planet had a past life hypnosis session? Like, do you think that is something that should be at some point? Is it helpful enough that everyone should do it? Or, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's informative whether you get therapy or not. If you go into it and you're shown what can be past lives, and it can be very emotional, and it can inform you about yourself. You wonder if they should have it at high school, and when you get to a certain age, everybody has a past life regression.
Hmm.
But the way the world is, there's some people who probably say it's demonic, or you're
Mm,
you're dancing with the devil, or you're just making it up. You deal with materialists who say there's no such thing as any spirituality.
yeah. And so that reminds me of the question that I just lost based on what you said previously. So I'm just curious how you as a practitioner could have like those gray areas, like in regards to like ETs and stuff. Like if one of your clients are telling you that they are experiencing an abduction or something like that, what is it that you don't completely like believe or like is it that they had the experience or who was it really that abducted them? Because I mean I yeah, I think that's the question I have to ask because like for me, I believe that pretty much everybody I've interviewed for NDEs, they've had an experience. I do believe they've had it. My question generally every now and then is who was it really that they were experiencing? Because I have seen that there's a lot of shape shifting or the ability to shape shift. And so that's probably my biggest gray area. But
Yeah.
yeah, so for you, like what where's the question mark? Like where could there be question marks? Like do you think that maybe you're getting information from sources you're not sure of or like how do you explain the gray area?
But it's almost like I hear the stuff and I feel like I want to stay level-headed and keep my feet on the ground and be almost like an investigator. And
Mm,
I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to get loads of information and try and understand it.
mm,
And I do believe a lot of it. I've got no doubts about there being an afterlife. And I do feel that there is something to alien abduction. And
mm,
there was a guy called Dr. John Mack, who was the professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. And he worked with over 130 people who said they were abducted by aliens.
mm,
And he was saying that there's definitely something going on here. So I kind of think somebody with those qualifications who had a job where they were a professor at Harvard, if they say there's something going on after he's really investigated it, we've got to pay attention to it. But
mm,
there's this thing to UFOs and alien abduction called high strangeness, where
mm,
it just gets so strange. And I've talked to a guy who he found himself in an apartment, and this is when he's actually there. It's not like he's dreaming it, or it's a vision, or he's remembering it. It's like he was there, and it
mm,
seemed a really familiar place. And he kept on catching a glimpse of somebody in the corner of his eye, and he'd look round and there'd be no one there. And he
mm,
saw all these photographs, and he was in the photographs with all these people he didn't know. And they all
mm,
looked like they were all smiling. And it was like he had lived another life in this apartment. And it's so strange. And you think, well, what's going on there? And then there was another guy who said they were at an airport. And again, he's saying he was there. This wasn't a dream. And
mm,
he's at those big windows. So you can look out and see the aeroplanes and you can see the runway. And the airport was completely empty, except there was somebody next to him. But when he looked round, they weren't there. He could see them out the corner of his eye. And this
mm,
aircraft came along the runway, started taking off, and then caught fire and exploded. And he saw that and he was really shocked with it. And the next thing he knew, he was in that aeroplane 2 minutes before. So he knew it was going to take off and explode.
Mm,
And it was almost this thing where it's like the ETs are testing humans to see how they react emotionally to certain scenarios.
mm,
And I had this woman talking about how she was found herself on a train and there was all these people around her in the seats, but they were kind of weird. She called them non-player characters, like from a video game. But she
mm,
realized it was fake. And she got up and she walked, she opened the carriage door, and there were these two ETs. And they were kind of annoyed with her because she'd worked it out. And it was like, oh, we've got to reset the program again. So
mm,
th this high strangeness shows up. And, Whitley Strieber, he wrote the book Communion, and he's quite well known for the past life alien abduction thing. And he
mm,
talks about how he had this cabin, his cabin in the woods. Sounds
mm,
creepy straight away, but
mhm,
he would have ETs showing up there, and he had guests who would also see them. So it wasn't just him. People would come and stay, and the next morning they'd say, "Right, we're leaving. We're not staying here another minute," because they'd had the ETs. But occasionally other people would say they had a visit from a deceased loved one. So spirits of the dead were showing up at the same time as the ETs.
mm,
And so all these things I'm talking about, they feel like
mm.
they got to be in a gray area because they're so strange, and you wonder what's going on here.
Yeah.
And it's so that's what's kind of where the gray area goes. And I was taken through past life regression, and it was with the lady who did the QHHT, and I
Mm,
saw this past life, and I saw the death of the past life. And she said to me, just float away, just allow yourself to move to the next thing, just tell me what comes to you next. And the next thing I saw, I was halfway through an alien abduction. And I was lying on this
mm.
table with these greys around me, and all these things happened. And it was very scary for me in that room with the hypnotherapist. She said she could see my muscles quivering on my body because I was so scared.
Wow.
But that came up as a memory and hypnosis. And so that's in my gray area. It's not like I think, oh, yeah, that definitely happened.
Mm,
You wonder maybe because I know so much about it, maybe my subconscious made it up. But I
mm,
have interviewed people who, well, you might say, are experts in alien abduction, and I've talked to them about it. And they pretty much saying, oh, yeah, that definitely happened.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so it's really scary.
Yeah. And if you really think about it, like I had asked, I said, have you had any sessions that support the idea of the reincarnation trap or Earth as a prison planet? When I listen to enough of these NDEs and things like that, and I mean, the ones that you just expressed right now kind of explain it too, that there's a very thin line between kind of seeing a past loved one and then seeing an alien the next second. And, it just sometimes I really start to wonder, is it all alien? Is everything else just an illusion? You know? And so I guess you're right when you say that in your role, you have to stay grounded and you have to stay skeptical because otherwise, when you're hearing this all day long, it will just completely unground you. Like you'll just be like, all over the place. But that question has come up, and it is in the back of my head always. It's like, is it all alien? And they're just kind of, I don't want to say toying with us, but yeah, kind of toying with us and showing us others, but it's always them because they come up too often.
Well,
So,
I don't see it like that. I think that whatever's going on, it's so complicated. There's no way we could work out what it is from our perspective. And you
mm,
hear about people having abductions with aliens and it being really negative, and then you have other people saying it's really positive. And
mm,
so I feel like there's probably all sorts of ETs out there, and some of them are good, some of them are bad. It's just like the human race.
yeah,
And different things are happening. But from what I get from talking to people who have near-death experiences and past life regressions, and it's a thing where us as a spirit or as a soul is very, very, see, I want to use the word powerful, but I don't think that's the right word. There's a lot of energy there. And I almost feel like if the ETs wanted to mess with us, then forget it. They got no chance because we're just too strong. But I also
Hmm.
feel like they've got a soul as well, and that some of us may have incarnated as greys before,
Mm.
and then come to this planet. Some people have talked about how they're a grey, and they agreed to have a life as a human for research or something. Or it's a thing where the Greys talk about how they reincarnate themselves and that they're so used to it and so aware of it. They have a
Mm.
body, and when it wears out, they just jump themselves into the next body and carry on with whatever they're doing.
Mm.
So this
Wow.
idea of a prison planet and controlling the souls and forced reincarnation, I don't think they could do it if they wanted to.
Mm. I like that attitude. And it kind of brings me back because, like I said, when I had that experience, I felt like something in me just, I mean, they just scattered when I had that feeling of go away, you know. Um, okay, I'm pretty much done with my questions. I just want to make sure I ask everything because this has been very amazing. Um, I think okay, so one question I had is, are there any natural skills that someone should have to be a successful hypnotherapist in your point of view?
Well, I did hear that it's better to be older. It's better to have it,
Really?
yeah, it's better to have had experience of life and the ups and downs and emotions and things, because it gives you this more of an understanding of the people you work with. And there's a thing of having a voice, a hypnotic voice, but I think you can develop that. And this I remember a tutor in college used to talk about how everybody tries to have the voice of a smooth FM DJ, where very quiet and what have you. But
Hmm.
it's possible to hypnotize somebody almost instantly, and I've seen it done.
Mm.
And I saw my tutor demonstrate it with somebody, and he said, "Okay, stand in front of me." And he put his hand out to shake hands, and instead of shaking their hand, he grabbed it and put it in front of their face like this, and just goes sleep. And they were hypnotized just like that. And he didn't need the smooth FM voice, and he just got them under. And I've also
Mm.
experienced things with pain relief when I was in college, when I was hypnotized and told that I had my hand in a bucket of ice. And the hypnotherapist was going over and over talking about it, not just saying one sentence about it for 10 minutes, talking about having a hand in a bucket of ice, and then brought us out of the hypnosis. And we all looked down, and our right hand was just white and it was numb, and the left
Oh,
hand was normal.
wow. Wow.
So I think you've got to be able to relate to people and have that life experience to be a hypnotherapist, and
Mm.
to have a kind of be non-judgmental and to accept people for who they are and work with them. And there's a thing they call being congruent, which is being yourself in a way, is that you have your own moral compass and you
Mm.
stay with it and you're congruent with who you are as a person while you're doing it all.
Mm. And I mean, I, I, I probably should have asked this question before, but what you just said kind of brings it because it just shows the power of hypnotherapy. Like if you guys can all be thinking about your hand in a thing of ice, and then everybody's hands like as if it had been in ice, that is just phenomenal. So, and it goes back to the ethics of a hypnotherapist. Is if somebody was completely unethical and they could hypnotize somebody, could they do damage? Like, could they do something, have them thinking something? Because that's one of the biggest, and this question has to be asked, it's one of the biggest concerns that people have who have not been hypnotized. Is so from your viewpoint, is it possible? Is this,
Well, I've always felt when I've been hypnotized that I was agreeing to what they were saying myself. If they wanted me to do something I didn't want to do, then I just wouldn't do it. And also, while you're hypnotized, it's just like being very relaxed. So if you wanted to, you could just get up and leave the room, or
mm,
cut the Zoom call if it's over Zoom.
wow.
And it can be very powerful if you agree to it and allow the guidance. There's
Mm,
a thing called hypnobirthing, where the woman would do a number of sessions with the hypnotherapist, and he would train her how to use hypnosis to dull the pain, just like this thing of putting your hand in a bucket. It's not something you do just one session. You have to do it for a few weeks,
Oh,
and
wow.
that can be really powerful. And there's a thing. There was this guy, and this was in the Victorian era, the British Army in India, and there were a lot of soldiers there that had this terrible illness, and they needed to be operated on. And the surgeon used hypnosis and did major operations, and the soldiers felt no pain. And this was a thing where he had assistants who would hypnotize the soldiers over a period of days and weeks to build them up to that ability. It wasn't just one
Oh my God. That
thing.
is
So,
amazing.
and it was also the British official body, the General Medical Council, in the 1950s, they recommended that all medical students learn hypnosis because it can be
Yeah.
so useful and powerful. That was never brought in, but that's what they wanted to do.
Wow. Like what you just said is like gold. You don't know. Like this
Yeah.
is amazing because first off, the first thing I would do exactly is that. Everybody, before you become a doctor, you must know the basis of hypnosis. So and in the fact that they discarded that shows you a lot, and we're not going to get into that, but a lot about the medical field. Like I think there's maybe too much money in a lot of these pain relievers for them to ever do that, because
Yeah.
right? Because hypnotherapy is kind of like it's free-ish. You're not using any tools besides your mouth. So wow, that is something that everyone should pay attention to because we probably really should be doing that. Like I really think so. Hmm.
Yeah. And so often I hear people say to me, I've tried everything else. You're my last resort. And you almost feel like, no, I should be the first resort.
I'm your go-to guy right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. So I think I did good with not asking too many questions. Is there anything that didn't get to express that you want to express right now?
Well, I just wanted to talk about this thing of spirits being the master orchestrators,
Hmm.
because I talked to this guy who had a near-death experience, and towards the end of this experience, this guy showed up who he didn't know who he was, but he had a very distinctive look about him, and he said, "Tell Madison at the salon that I'm okay. Tell Madison I'm okay at the salon." And then he talked to his children about it because he was like 60 something. And after he got out of hospital, and a couple of months later, his daughter came to him with this business card, and it was for this young lady called Madison at the hairdressers at the salon. So
Mm,
he booked an appointment, and he sat with her, and he said, "This is going to sound crazy." And he told her what happened, and she was crying. And his description of this guy was exactly her grandfather.
mm,
And he had seen the grandfather on this white porch putting together these red, white, and blue ribbons into this display. And she said that he would work with the Veterans Association to do all this flag stuff for them. And afterwards, he got to know the family, and he went and traveled 1,000 miles, and he stood on that white porch that he'd seen in his near-death experience.
wow.
But I just finish with this thing that Madison said that this wasn't the first time her grandmother had reached out, her grandfather. She, when he died, she'd been looking into his life insurance to see if he had any because they thought he did. And she found this card for this insurance guy, and she called it, and this guy answered the phone, and he was like, "No, no, you've got the wrong person. I'm in California." And she was saying, well, this is the number. And he said, "Well, you've got the area code wrong. You've got the number right, but this is California." And he said, "What
Mm,
was your name?" And she said, "I'm Madison." And he said, "Where are you?" And she said, "I'm in Utah." And he said, "I had a car accident with a car flipped over onto the roof, and I was all dazed, and I heard somebody shouting at me, 'Tell Madison in Utah I'm okay.'" And they kept shouting it over and over. And you think about this series of events that she would find the insurance card, dial the wrong number to get to exactly the right person. And it's this
oh
thing of
my God.
the spirits being the master orchestrators. and you just wonder how it could have happened. Maybe the spirits interfered with the phone call and flipped it into the wrong phone line or something. But that that is a great story. That really stands out for me.
Yes, that is amazing. Everything about that is just, it just it adds a lot of questions. Like how, like what are they seeing that they could even maneuver things like that? It's off the charts.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. Okay, so is there, do you have, you said you're writing a book, so you're in the process. Do you have anything, do you want to tell your YouTube, tell us your YouTube, website, how to contact you? Are you taking new clients? Just give us the whole, how do people
yeah.
reach you?
Well, I've got the oh, bang my microphone. Our Paranormal Afterlife is my podcast. That's got over 300 hours of interviews with all sorts of people, near-death
Mm,
experiences and mediums. People talk about children's past lives, and I've got the Alien UFO podcast. That's over 120 episodes,
mm,
and that's fascinating. My website is called pastliveshypnosis.co.uk, and there's a booking page on there, and I do a free 20-minute call. If you're thinking of doing a past life regression, I'll get on
mm.
Zoom with you for 20 minutes and we can talk about it and see if that's something you want to do. And I do those calls all the time.
Wow, okay. I might sign up. Cool, cool. All right. And so people should contact you there on your website. Okay. All right. And is there any message that you have for, for mankind in general? Like something that you want to tell or share that you'd like to share right now?
Yeah, when I'm in that space with the spirit guides, there's a message that comes through so often, which is kind of that they're always with you and they're always on your side, and they will always help you if you ask. And I get the impression they won't help you if you don't ask. There's something to do with free will there, because I've thought about that. If they love you so much and they want to help, why don't they just do
Mm-hmm.
it? But they have to
Mm-hmm.
wait for you to ask for it.
Ask and you shall receive.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's a perfect way to end that. So people who are, if you're struggling now and you're just, it's all inside, you're not thinking, like, stop, focus, and say, look, help, 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 help. Ask for help. But thank you so much, Simon. This is something that I've been wanting for a while to like look into, and like you gave us all the answers, and I really truly enjoyed it. And I thank you so much for your time. So I just want to
Right.
thank
Yeah, it's
you.
been really great. I've enjoyed this.
Yes, and I mean, look out for me. I might contact you because I'm really thinking I need to find out who I've been and what I've been doing. But thank you so much, Simon. All
Okay.
right, bye bye.
Bye.